My name is Dr. Karma Corcoran. I'm an enrolled citizen of the Chippewa Cree Nation, and I have two of my sisters, my friends, with me today that are going to share with us their work as peacekeepers. And so I have my friend Cheryl and my friend Christy, and I would love it if you would introduce yourselves and who your people are, and then I'm going to ask you some questions about your work.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Corcoran. I'm Cheryl Demert Fairbanks, and I'm Tlingit Tsimshian from Alaska, Southeast Alaska. I was born in Ketchikan, Alaska, and raised on Prince of Wales Island. And currently, I make my home for many, many years in New Mexico, the land of enchantment.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Coker and Kishi. My name's Christy Chapman. I am from the Pueblo of Zuni, and I have a home in Zuni, but residing in Albuquerque, New Mexico as well. Thank you.
Wonderful. And we've known each other for quite a long time now. I chased you to the ends of America to ask you to come teach in my summer program at Lewis and Clark Law School. And through peacekeeping, I met you, and luckily I get to see you every now and then in the Southwest when I travel. And so what I'd like to have you share about is, what is peacekeeping? How would you define that?
Well, I will say that peacemaking is an indigenous form of dispute resolution. And we've always had it in Indian country, so it's not new. And people, it's ancient, it's really based on our core values. And through those core values come our songs, stories, our lessons. And through our language, our native language, comes the law also. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of distinct and unique to each tribe. So it's not a one size fits all. And interestingly, it's in the Bible, and throughout the world there have been peacemakers, and so America has come up with restorative justice, and that's not really based on American jurisprudence. It's really based, it's really based on our indigenous concepts of justice, and so. We're cousins with restorative justice and transformative justice, and it's really a way of putting our thinking, our sense of justice and fairness into disputes. And it could be dispute oriented, but it could also be healing, celebration, honoring, so it's broad.
Yes.
It's very panoramic.
Wonderful. Christy, what do you think of it as?
Just adding on to what she's already shared about our indigenous ways of doing things, peacemaking, the term, what we would call it is our ways, our laws, our core values. As indigenous communities, that's what we have to be in community. And we know that, as peoples, we were here before contact, and our communities are still intact, and it's a result of our ways, our laws, our core values. So it's, as she stated, it's resolving those issues and disputes by talking things out, and indeed there may be issues that might have hurt people. And so bringing those impacted by whatever harm and bringing everyone together and discussing, the hurt, the harm, and in that manner, it's life. It's what makes us who we are, and so in that respect, that's peacemaking.
Well, and when I think about Western jurisprudence and that harm and who you've harmed, we see the aspect when it comes to victim impact statements. But what I think is so valuable about peacemaking is that all tribal people have always had this circle of who's been harmed. So for the Cree way, it would be myself if I had harmed you. It would be you because I've harmed you. But then it would be our families, community, because the residual harm that my actions have caused aren't just between you and I. And I think that's something that Western jurisprudence could do a lot better at. And even because we are so punitive, that we want to punish, but yet harm reduction needs to happen to me also, who, is responsible for the harm to you, because I've also harmed myself and my community. So when you think about the work that you're doing, what is like a healing circle? Can you kind of describe to me what that would look like?
With healing circles, there could be different types. One could be specific for women who have endured rape or what have you. It's women coming together and being able to sit in circle and sharing what they've gone through with individuals, such as, what they've experienced. In the process of, as a victim, no one really wants to tell their families or whomever. And so the healing circle for women who've been victims of rape can come together and share their experiences, and in a sacred space where it's confidential. And that sharing is the biggest step of letting go and releasing. And in the process, they might not yet be at that place of forgiving, but in the circle, it's a process of letting go. And in time, once they hear the different experiences of other women within the circle, and they're at different stages, of course, but hearing from others how they were able to let go and forgive, not for that individual that harmed them, but for themselves, that provides that healing, that opportunity to share and not to hold that anger and bitterness in, and give it back to Creator. And in that sense, that's one example of the healing circle. And I will.
So Cheryl, I have a question for you. As as a lawyer, as a judge, something that really I think is important about the women healing circles, and I know it's different in different tribal belief systems, but for the Cree, we have very strong gender roles, and so we don't talk about certain things with the opposite gender. And I can't help but think about women that are required by this larger system to say in detail sometimes what's happened to them, whether it's by an unknown person, a family member, a friend, a neighbor. And so do you feel like if we could do more of protecting and honoring the sacredness of women's stories, that that's something that would be valuable in the justice system as a whole.
Oh, yes. I think there's a lot of room for sharing between jurisdictions, sharing between ideas of, because American justice is in crisis. And so they keep doing more of the same, expecting a different result. And they're pausing to take a look at our indigenous ways. And, you know, it's interesting because, especially in dealing with women, you know, so many of our women have gone missing. And it's amazing how America can just discount that. And when someone from the dominant society goes missing, the whole world is on notice, you know, and we have over 5,000 plus women and men missing. And but I think what Christy said is there's a sacredness in the circle. Yes. And in that sacredness, if you're a peacemaker, you really have the responsibility to hold people accountable. It's not sugar, the issues are not sugar-coated in any way, but we say be tough on the issue, gentle on the person.
Oh.
And I think that that has carried us through some really hard times, so we're not punitive with the victim or the perpetrator or the situation, because whenever we have that continuing relationship with each other like we all do, we have to do something different.
Yes.
If not, we polarize a family, we polarize a community, we polarize a tribe, and we get sides, you know.
Yes.
And that happens in a family really fast. And so it's important as peacemakers to make sure that we're honoring, you know, the individual, the tribal, and the community values in a way that we're moving toward resolution. And there's times when we've had to stop the peacemaking because it was spiraling down.
Yeah.
You know, and I remember this one particular difficult case. We were spiraling down. People were blaming each other, crying and carrying on. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is going nowhere, you know. And I recessed because, and I said, your assignment is to go talk to a respected elder tonight, and whomever you want, you know, and you let them know and ask for their advice, humbly ask for their advice, and listen to that elder. They came back, and they had better resolutions. I was trying to fix a resolution in my mind. Their resolution was so much better than the one I was trying to piece together, you know, and it fit their culture.
Yes.
And it fit, and they are going to live together in that same small community. And then this child is going to have more people who love her, surrounding her, instead of pulling her in all these different directions.
Yes, which causes more harm to her. And I think something, too, that's so integral to the process is that you can pause it. Yeah. And, you know, as we've acknowledged, the justice system in this country is so flawed, and now there's these huge backups. I mean, people are sitting for a long time in jail before they even, you know, get to go to trial or whatever, and then the process is so rushed. I heard from a young woman earlier this morning who hadn't even been given the right information, and then she just took a plea, you know. But and the judge had told her, well, actually, da-da-da. And so instead of pausing and saying, you know, you need to spend a little more time with your client needs to know more, and then let's come back together again, that judge probably had somebody else on the docket that was next. And so I think that's something that Western culture really needs to know and to practice, is pausing.
Yes. We borrow from the Hawaiians. We've done a lot of work with the Hawaiian people, and their ho'oponopono, they say put it in the shade. And we
I love that.
and we have had to remind each other because emotions get high, and and you want to facilitate, and you kind of are trying to get the whole picture, and then often you have to put it in the shade. And once you put it in the shade, it really calms everyone
I
down.
love that.
And then sometimes we put it in the shade and say, okay, we're going to take a recess and you're going to come up with a solution.
Yeah.
Because often they haven't talked to each other
Well,
for years.
of course not.
And when we set the sacred space, put it in the shade, give them the opportunity to come up with a resolution, because they know stuff that we don't know, and they know what's going to work and what's not. And
Yeah.
so we put it in the shade, they come back with a resolution, and then we go around the circle to say, do you agree? So people are having to affirm that this is a resolution. And I say, if you don't agree, make it better. Don't just say,
Good for you.
say, oh, I don't like that. Rah, rah, rah. No, make it better.
Yeah.
And then we put the basket, which is our talking tool, we put it in the middle of the circle and say, what did we leave out? Because when you leave this room, I don't want you saying, oh, we missed this, we missed that. Now's the time to do it.
Yeah.
And so we built in certain techniques that we learned the hard way, to make sure it's comprehensive and to make sure it's healing and to make sure everyone's had a voice. The equity piece is important.
And I think that is so important to be heard.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, we all want to be heard. And some of us are going to come forward right away and say, I was heard and this is how I was heard, and this is what I want or expect. And others, it's going to take them time to be able to say those things, or much less even process what they really want, what is going to be healing for them. And once again, I think it's a system that we could all do well to learn just in our everyday life of conflicts. And this is what I always say, except my husband. I'm right, and so there's that. I must be doing okay. I've been married a very long time. But I think another thing that's really important is this concept of putting it in the shade. I had somebody tell me one time to put a blanket over it.
Oh, yeah.
And I couldn't accept that because I had a feeling that the blanket was never going to be taken away. And instead, that this huge issue, which was a community issue, was never going to be truly addressed. And it wasn't. There wasn't a circling back and exposing it again. And so even to this day, there's a lot of damaged relationships, people that are no longer in community with each other. And I should call y'all in. But I don't even think anyone's willing to come to the circle anymore, because of how it was handled. So I really appreciate that you're also learning things as you are doing the work. So I have a question when, after all, we've been talking about incarceration. And we have people that are coming home. Not all of them have a pathway home. Not everybody is welcome home. And so what can we do better? What methods of the circle and peacemaking can we do to help our relatives that are wanting to come home?
I would say it's comprehensive. There has to be that re-educating the educated. You educate the community about our ways of resolving conflict and issues, and really educating communities about what it means to, what our teachings are in accepting accepting them back into the community, holding them accountable, but not bringing shame upon them, and educating individuals within a community about peacemaking. It starts in our homes, and also working with, of course, they're in county or state institutions, and educating at the state level about the process of using circle peacemaking. And then it gets to that point of, okay, the individual is going to be released. Prior to their release, sitting down with their probation officer, whoever's going to be, whoever has to, oversee how it's going to take place, and really listening, which is not often done, where they're just saying you're out, you're free,
Yes.
but really putting together something so that you're not setting them up for failure. And that process is coming into circle and talking about what the needs are going to be, what resources they can get hooked up with, doing it in circle so that it's not something that's a cookie cutter, because each case is going to be specific. But hearing, coming, laying down that sacredness, because this person is, in general, in all our indigenous communities, someone that was prayed for.
Yes.
And so reintroducing and offering them those supports by talking things out, that's one of the ways to how circle can be used, community, at a state, and then when that individual is going to be re-entering community.
And I think that's what's so important too, bridging off what you said, that it's not a cookie cutter system like Western, sentencing laws, different measures that have come up that, there is no taking into consideration what that person really even needs to not only address the harm that's been done, but to help them so that they don't reoffend, or that they can come back into community and be successful with reentry. And I would argue that the larger system doesn't want to take the time to do that. And so I know that you guys in your work in New Mexico, I think Judge Abby of the UROC is, someone who we've, had times together with, Judge, the Honorable Yazzie, and the work that they have done between the systems has just been amazing, where I think that they've built up respect and relationship within those systems, because often you hear people say things like, well, tribal people can't be in charge of this or that because they would go too easy. For a long time, these processes were accepted in juvenile cases, but boy, you send those adults to us. And I'm hoping that we see a change. Do you two feel like we're seeing a change of, the larger system starting to see what you're doing, accepting that this is a good process?
That shift, we call it the shift. And
Okay.
it's shifting from that adversarial, punitive mindset to one that's more healing and restorative and transformative. And, like if someone's getting out of prison, to have a circle with his family and community there helping support him or her would be so powerful.
Yes.
Because what I heard yesterday is so many of them are repeat offenders. Even the strongest people that were there yesterday,
Yes.
I was just so upset because they're going back in. And so I think if you had a circle that was healing, where they're accepted back in and they're having courageous discussions, because a lot of our communities are like, oh, they're criminals, you know, and they're not as forgiving, or they're not willing to sit down and have the hard discussions
Yeah.
on what this person has been through. And so there's room for that, and there's room for even through the whole criminal process, prior to litigation, what are you willing to do? Maybe he or she needs treatment rather than
Yes.
being locked up. You know, because
Absolutely.
we're treating alcoholism or drug addiction as a criminal act, instead of, hey, if you had cancer, we'd have a fundraiser, you know.
Yes.
And here we have so many of our people who are addicted and getting themselves in trouble, and then they end up in prison, you know. And we have a high rate of our Native people being in prison, you know.
And frankly, statistically speaking, especially women, Native women, overwhelmingly, the large majority of Native women are in prison because of crimes related to drugs and alcohol. And oftentimes in concert with their significant other, who's often a male, where she will, you know, she will take the charge for him. And that if it wasn't for the drugs and alcohol, they would not be stealing or, you know, be involved in physical violence with somebody else. And as I had shared earlier when I was talking with our friend Chanel, that prison is no place to heal from drugs and alcohol, that drugs and alcohol are in prison. And so I argue too for culturally specific programs. And, you know, our brother that was, you know, there yesterday, Leandro, and how important those culturally specific programs are to offenders.
And I think the community has to be an integral part of the
Yes.
healing, because what's happening is there's violence or whatever, and it gets into a system, and there's no healing. There's just incarceration. And I found that if we pause to rethink it, and we're moving toward a healthier community, and the community has a role in it, we're getting healthier as a community.
Yes.
So we don't need all these courts and all these programs.
Yeah. Because you can't mandate
Yeah.
healing.
And it goes right to culture. You know, if a
Absolutely.
person is feeling good about themselves, their own identity, they feel good, they make good choices. And so helping our people make good choices and choosing education over drugs, you know, that's a choice.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of our youngsters and a lot of our people, once they get connected with culture and language, they begin to feel that sense of belonging, and that healing comes through our language and culture. And I've seen remarkable changes, you know, remarkable changes.
I have too, and something working with the women that I do. One is identity.
Yeah.
You know, who are my people? And not everybody gets to grow up with their people, so that claiming of identity. The elders that come into prison, those that come in and do spiritual programming, like our friend Gabe Galenda yesterday, that connection to one's identity of culture and then community, because we all want to belong somewhere. and especially our young people involved in the juvenile system, a lot of times when they're in gangs and different groups, they'll talk about that's where they belong, that's who's accepted them, that's their chosen family.
That's their tribe.
Yeah, yes. Oh, I hate that. And so we need to come against that and say, your tribe's over here, your people over here. But then we've got to do the hard work of creating that pathway, creating those opportunities for them to access their culture, and as you're doing, in a way that it can be received by them. And I appreciated you speaking to, it's not about shaming somebody. I know the women in prison have a lot of shame that they carry with them, and I was home visiting my women elders, and I was talking to them about that and what could I do. And one of my elders said, we have a wiping of tears ceremony. And so you can bring that to them and they can talk about what they're feeling. They can let go of that shame. They can wipe their tears, and we can help with that. And I just so appreciate it, because these women just are very, very brought down by that. And the Western system, and I've heard judges say things to people that are really not called for, just adding more shame onto the shame that they have. Is there anything you'd like to share before we kind of close our time together?
I wanted to say something as I was listening to you, because we work with Indian child welfare cases also. And what we were noticing is that those who were in prison had been in the foster care system.
Yes.
And so I think we have to pay attention to that, because our prison population is increasing with the women and men, and who's taking care of the kids, and so that goes to healthier communities and putting the sacredness back into the family and extended family. And so we have to prevent our kids from being separated and on the outside, and then they don't belong in the Indian world or the white world.
Yeah.
And then they're getting themselves, they're in that gray area where they don't belong. And then it goes to high suicide, drugs and alcohol, dropout rates. And so putting that healthier concept back, and we're doing it, you know what I mean? And we're getting stronger. And of course we're resilient, but we have to just be healthier so that our kids are taken care of and they're loved and nurtured, so we don't need ICWA.
Well, and I think too, there's some programs around. There used to be one here in town. I don't know if it still exists, where a local Native American nonprofit has a family program based on foster care. And so Native kids that are in foster care, they come with their foster families, not all of whom are Native, because we do not have enough Native foster parents. So anyone's watching, think about that. But they actually sometimes get to see their siblings that are in different families, their family members that are allowed to see them, that are going through programs can come. I went to a couple of them, and, obviously we share food and maybe craft time. And these foster kids know each other, and they can interact with each other because they understand each other. And so I really feel like we need to do more about building these programs, because we have so many kids going into foster care that are not in Native families. And then if they are, still holding these things, having Indian parenting, all of those things. So, and as a lot of people said yesterday, we really need to be thinking about the children.
And even those parents that are incarcerated, and part of ICWA and active efforts is how is the state, communicating with whatever facilities out there
Absolutely.
so that they can maintain that contact with the kids. And one thing I want to share is, that shift, not only in our communities of reaffirming those things that helped us resolve issues and disputes, but also hearing from state level, federal level on this process of circle, peacemaking circles, using it in reforming the justice system, reforming, how we treat our folks incarcerated.
Absolutely.
And so we just
I'm
want to end
actually
there.
speaking at a national conference, I think it's this month, I can't remember when, about prisoners' families. And so my concentration is the children. We need to change the system where children can do more than just write to their parents in prison. And so wonderful programs like Girl Scouts Behind Bars or different things. Every prison should have something that is fostering not losing that relationship with your children and actually fostering healing, because it's a very hurtful experience for a child to have their loved one, as I was always told growing up, being away, and so thank you both so much. First of all, thanks for coming to the conference. Thanks for being my friends. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. Thank you both so much.
Thank
I
you.
wish we were going to get together a little more.